So, so in any event, so these chapter five, they're still good, they're still interesting, but they don't have the sage associated with it. It's fine. So, 10 generations from Adam to Noah. So that is a very that was quantifiable. They literally looked at Adam, who then went to Cain and Abel, and then Enos and Seth. That's Cain and Abel's children, and then they showed there were then 7 more generations until we got to Noah. So they said, what a coincidence! There were 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and why? In order to make known what long suffering is his for all those, but excuse me, for is his. And by the way, long suffering is erech. If you look over to the right in the Hebrew, it says erech apayim. And you know that expression from Adonai el Rachum v'Chanun erech apayim v'rav. It's so long suffering is a decent enough translation, but so long suffering is his, and I guess what they're communicating is that right. So what do we know about Adam? That he's the first person, and that they had the apple and stuff like that, and and punished. But what do we know about Noah? And that is that generation was terrible, so terrible that God had to wipe out the entire generation, and start all over again, right? And I think what it's saying is when it says 10 generations from Adam to Noah, in order to make known what the hell happened here? Doesn't matter because I'm still on with you guys, but this was weird. I think what it was trying to say though is that God's really patient, right? That God, waited and waited, and it was, it even started kind of bad with Adam, but God hung in there and stayed the course, and then finally, after 10 generations, God was like, I can't do this anymore. But I think what it's trying to do is communicate in some way, it's trying to celebrate God as saying, right, look how patient God is. God was long suffering, was continued to suffer and suffer until finally it was, right, for all those generations kept on provoking him until he brought upon them the waters of the flood, right? Every generation just kept provoking him, but God kept being okay with it, kept giving us second chances, and now God brought on the flood. I mean, after 10 generations. And then it says again, and there were 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. What a coincidence, right? In order to make known what long suffering, or maybe patient is the better translation again, is his for all those generations kept on provoking him until Abraham came and received the reward of all of them. So, and that were from Noah on, it was, now there was idol worship and there was misbehavior and stuff like that, right, until finally good old Abraham came along.
So the generation after Noah and the generation before Noah were
bad.
So the flood didn't do any good?
Right. In fact, we know that what happens the generation right after Noah is the Tower of Babel, that all those people came together. I mean, was it so bad what they did? I don't think so. But the Torah says that it was really bad. And what does it say? It says that they were, that they tried to build a tower high enough to reach to God so they could make a name for themselves. And as a result, God punished them and changed their languages.
I find it kind of interesting that he didn't just wipe us out and start fresh at that point.
Well, God essentially did, just kept Noah and the family.
I mean, after Noah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, why not try again?
Yeah, I mean,
well, believe it or not, there's a midrash which says, or maybe it's a story that says that God continued to make world after world after world after world until God got it right. And maybe that was having to do with creation, No, I think it had to do with after the flood that God kept making, destroying until God fell and got it. But um, but it's like it says, for all those generations kept on provoking him until Abraham came and received the reward of all of them. In other words, it was like God wanted to reward the next generation and the next generation, but they were unworthy. And it was like God put like reward in escrow to some degree, right? And then finally, when Abraham came around, right, God was able to, God gave like the full reward that had been sitting in escrow and collecting interest and gave it to Abraham.
Right.
And so it's communicating, look how great Abraham was. And and so like I know what you're thinking. You're thinking what I'm thinking, which is, yeah, this isn't as good as the other stuff. But all right, fine. Right? They're getting all caught up on the 10 utterances, 10 this, 10 that. Let's take a look.
What is this trying to tell us? Is
Nothing.
this just giving us information?
Right. Well, no.
Not...
What it's trying to tell information, and it's trying to tell us, look how patient God is.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't. But what you're accurately saying here, and I agree with you, is that it's just not. It's if we had seen that somewhere else, we would be okay with it. But it just feels so out of context or out of what we would typically find that it just doesn't feel right. And I agree. And I feel in this whole chapter, or at least most of this chapter, it's like it disappoints. We're going to keep going. It's not like it's not worth it. It's totally worth doing them. But it's just disappoints because it doesn't have nearly the kind of depth, I think, that some of the previous ones
Do you
had.
think this just got put in as an afterthought to give history and context to everything?
Maybe, or also possibly is, these are just things that didn't really have a place in other places of our literature, but they still kind of liked it. They liked the fact that we made the connection between 10 of this, 10 generations to this and 10 generations to that, and they felt like it was worthy of kind of being inserted somewhere. But it needed to go, like it went into the miscellaneous folder that you have with doesn't really have a listing or a subject matter, so we'll just put it in the miscellaneous drawer. And here it was. And then what happened was that they started to say, oh, why don't we organize these things? Because we have a bunch of things with 10, a bunch of things with 7, a bunch of things with 4, and we'll just kind of organize it that way. And look, I very likely could be not giving enough credit to this. Or, said differently, I very likely could just not understand the depths of this. But what I can say is I have read a number of Pirkei Avot commentaries. I read them in anticipation of our classes. And no one really has these like insightful thoughts about this. And again, maybe we're all just missing something really deep, but no one really has any insightful thoughts about this. They just say this is what it's saying.
But it's interesting because I look back at the first one, which begins Moses received the Torah.
Right.
So why isn't this first? Because doesn't this happen before Moses?
Well, yeah, except the one from Moses, right, which is 1:1, that's a great one, which is Moses received the Torah on Mount Sinai and passed the Torah to Joshua, who then passed the Torah to the members of the Great Assembly, who then passed the Torah to the prophets and the sages, right? And what that's saying is it's establishing the credibility of the writers, because what it's doing is because it starts with Moses, but then ends with the sages. And these are the sages. And so, right, and so what it's doing is it's saying, got good news for you. It's as if we received it directly. These words that we're saying, it's as if we received it directly from God. And so that one is almost like and I hear you, but that one, this one is more like an FYI. Isn't it interesting? 10 generations, look how great God is. But that one is, it went from him to him to him to him to us. look how great we are. And I think it's basically giving legitimacy to the fact that they're writing this.
So this is at the time that the Second Temple is on decline. Apparently, these guys are kind of competing with the Second Temple.
Well, some of the early ones were, but not. But Pirkei Avot is mostly written post-destruction.
Post-destruction.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I guess in some cases, like for instance, people credit Rabbi Meir with a lot of these uncredited texts.
Yeah.
In fact, and we know that because we actually read that story once in which it was Meir and I can't remember, was it can't remember who he was with, but the two of them tried to, you might remember because it's a great story about how they tried to sabotage the Nasi, the president, by saying by asking him a question from this esoteric, text, but the other person had heard them talking about it, and then kind of clued him into it and stuff like that, right? And then as a result of that, they said that Rabbi Meir would always be kind of, be described what others say. His comments would make it, but not necessarily always by name. And they suggest that these were all kind of included by Rabbi Meir, which, by the way, it's very in context or, on brand with him for him to have just interesting insights about what a coincidence, 10 generations here, 10 generations there. And in both cases, it ended with, there was something of consequence happened after 10 generations. And so it is very Rabbi Meir to come up with a thought like this. Yeah. But whether it's truly like an ethic, that's going to help us, that's going to give us fodder for growth and learn, and personal growth, I'm not so sure. But
well, I'll tell you, I've been doing Pirkei Avot on and off for 3 or 4 years, and the last couple you've done the individuals more than the Pirkei, but on the Pirkei, I thought it was.
They're fascinating too. That's what my mom said. Yes, today, I think yes. In which she said,
and they're challenging for you to think and grow.
Oh, I love this. She says, oh, I love it.
Be a better person.
Yeah, be a better person. This less so, but we'll get into other ones. But this less so because I know. That even
not everyone, but
this one less so, but it's fine. So let's take a look at the next one, which is Abraham. Abraham, it says.
So you're going 5-3
now. Yeah, but now the previous ones, the previous two, about 10 utterances and then 10 generations, were kind of about our decline and about how we became less and less worthy over time, and God's patience and God not finding anyone to give, to credit, and finally Abraham got everything. But this one is now less about, the decay of society, but rather, our worthiness, and obviously our worthiness with one person representing all, but it talks about his worthiness, but it's a reflection of our worthy. Instead of it being you guys stink, it's like, look how great you are. And so the next one is about Abraham, and it says, with 10 trials was Abraham, our father, may he rest in peace, tried. And he withstood them all to make known how great was the love of Abraham, our father. Peace be upon him. Now, okay, so the Torah has a number of cases in which they claim that Abraham was tried by God, or by God, sometimes by people, God through people, or just directly by God. And excuse me, a number of them you guys probably can know or remember, but most of them you can't. And so the question is, what are these 10 trials? Now, what I can tell you is that there is not agreement on what the 10 trials are. I mean, there's agreement on some of the trials, but not agreement on all of the trials.
Was there agreement that there were 10?
Well,
Or do some people
kind of. No
not
one
think that?
says no, there were 12. It's like everyone uses this and
I was
says there were
thinking
10, but people say that they have different 10s. That's really the point. And now, so I have provided you with Maimonides, the Rambam's opinion about what those 10 trials are. And again, of the 10 that Maimonides puts out there, I would say for the most part, 7 of them or 6 or 7 of them are consistent with everybody. And then sometimes there are others who go and say, no, these were the trials and those, but 6 of them remain and 3 or 4 change. Sometimes it's because Midrash came in, like this, for example, the story of Abraham smashing the idols, which some people know, some people don't know, but this story is not in the Torah, that's Midrash. And so Maimonides doesn't put that in his 10 trials. His are entirely Torah, but others do. And so so depending on who you read, which commentator you're looking at, they're going to give you 10 different ones. I felt like let's use Maimonides because he is Maimonides. He's the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest. So so we're going to go through the 10. I have put out for you the 10 trials of Abraham, and we'll read them. And maybe what we can do is discuss what we think were again, Maimonides puts out the verse numbers. I put the verses for us, and then let's us mine for what we think is the trial based on what Maimonides has to say. So number 1 comes from Genesis 12:1. By the way, this is all chronological.
Is this Lech Lecha?
Yes.
Ah.
Yes. God says to Abraham, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. Trial number 1. I mean, does it feel like he was on the racks being being tortured and being no, of course not. But trial number 1 for Abraham, it seems like it was his.
As far as a little bit that I know about life back in the day, it was all very tribal and family.
Yes, it was.
To be thrown out of your family was like big time punishment.
Or to leave your family, because he wasn't thrown out, but he chose to, right?
Right, but I'm just saying the analogy is people getting thrown out of their family was
like a death sentence.
Death sentence, okay.
Yes.
Now he's being told to leave the family and the land where the family lives and go.
Yeah, you don't know anything familiar. You
Nothing
don't know how to
sounds
take care of
pretty scary,
yourself.
right. Yeah, no, agreed. Very scary.
Yeah.
Total trial. I'm agreeing. I agree. So number 1, I think it's a pretty decent trial on Abraham.
Yeah.
But again, these are all to say, look how worthy he is that he had to deal with these trials. You go ahead.
How old was Abraham at this time?
I think he
Was
was.
he a young man?
No. I think it was like 70, 60 or something. 70, right?
So this wasn't a chance to send him out to learn some more that he needs to develop.
No, what I think it was, in my opinion, again, by the way, just a reminder, I don't believe this even happened. But, I believe it happened in the Torah. I'm just saying I don't believe it's historical. But I believe that there is, but still, what you're saying about it being tribal and leaving but that's very real. And so what we can say is even if it's a fictional account, the fictional account is a trial. There's no, so I'm agreeing.
People reading it back then would have written what a trial this was to have to leave.
But what I was going to say though is that the goal was Canaan and the Jews or our people going to Canaan, and Abraham was deemed the first worthy person to be asked to make this trip, even though the Torah would actually dispute that, because believe it or not, this is really one of my favorite little oh by the ways of the Torah, which I will read for you, just so so you can believe me when I tell you. So right, we think about this, this move that Abraham is doing, and it's just so courageous and everything. So that's chapter 12, verse 1. So allow me to read chapter 11, verse 27 through 31. So 4 verses prior to this. This is the line of Terach. Terach is Abraham's father. Terach begot Avraham, Nahor, and Haran. So Abraham's got 2 brothers. And Haran begot Lot. And so, and Abraham has got, the nephew Lot. Haran died in the lifetime of his father Terach in his native land Ur of the Chaldeans. Abraham and Nahor took to themselves wives, the name of Abraham's wife being Sarah, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, and the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child. Okay, so here we go. Terach, Abraham's father, took his son Abraham, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram. They set out together from Ur, which is way into Babylonia, into Iraq. They set out together from Ur for the land of Canaan. But when they had come as far as Haran, they settled there. So what I'm trying to read for you is, actually, the Torah is telling us
That the whole family.
that they were going to Canaan anyway, right? And then the next line after that is, so they settled in Haran, and then the next line after that is, God says to Abraham, go to your native land, go from your native land, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. In other words, God was just like, I thought you guys were going there in the first place. It could have been Terach, your dad, but no, I guess it's going to have to be you.
Oh, that's interesting. So he's not saying to Abraham, just keep going. What's wrong with you?
Right? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I thought we had an agreement. You guys were on your way over here, and now you stopped. Come on, I need you over there. It's just kind of an interesting thing. And oh, by the way, thing. So okay, so trial number 1, being asked to go from his native land. Okay, trial number 2. This is now Genesis 12, verse 10. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. So trial number 2, he had to withstand famine. Everyone else did too, but we'll grant that it's something unique and special for Abraham. Trial number 3, which comes literally the next verse. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they'll kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may remain alive thanks to you. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how very beautiful the woman was. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace. And because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, donkeys, male and female slaves, jennies, and camels. But God afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarai, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now here is your wife, take her and be gone. And Pharaoh put some men in charge of him, and they sent him off with his wife and all that he possessed. So trial number 3.
This doesn't sound like a trial to me.
Right, this one is actually.
Say he whored her out.
I know,
What's wrong
right.
with that? That's not a trial.
I know, but well,
The trial
okay.
would have been if he didn't.
Right. Well, right. So yes. Everyone's correct. I think right. So it's the trial is either that he was forced to
Well, it's a damned if you do or damned if
right
you don't.
forced to whore his wife out to the Pharaoh in order to save his life. Now we don't feel good about that. We feel like that's terrible, but something tells me that it was going to happen no matter what.
So it sounds like a trial for Sarai rather than for Avram.
Yeah.
It was, but this is what Maimonides is. I'm agreeing with you,
Yeah.
but Maimonides is saying that it may have been a trial for Sarai too, but
Well, women
it
don't
was
matter.
also a trial for him to have to go through this.
Yeah.
And he got rich because of it and was alive because of it, and yes, but still he was forced to do that.
I don't understand the sentence has the number 17 in front. But God afflicted Pharaoh and his household with mighty plagues on account of Sarai.
The wife, yeah. In other
Why?
words, because
Because it was
God punished Pharaoh for
For
sleeping with
stealing Abraham.
right, even though it was
Right.
right, and so it
Even
was
though he-
basically God saving Abraham.
Okay.
But what you're correctly noting is Pharaoh did nothing wrong, right? Pharaoh thought she was his sister.
Right.
I was gonna say God's saving Sarai from
Right, that
really.
too. But one thing is for sure, Pharaoh did nothing wrong in all this. But Pharaoh
And
was
then
punished.
later on, he says, well, technically she is my sister because she's which I never knew.
Oh, you're saying that? Wait.
Well,
What was that?
Well, he says somewhere that, well, he's really Sarai is really, he doesn't say in addition to being my wife, he says, why did you not tell me, why did you say she's my wife? This is, no, here's your wife taking her blood. And Pharaoh puts him in, somewhere in here I was reading today that he said, Abraham says, she's also the daughter of
There might be a second one, but I don't know if.
no, maybe I
Well, let's see, because we might. I kind of feel like.
well, but also Pharaoh's partly to blame because if Sarai had said, we don't know what Sarai said about it, and if she said, no, I don't want it, he's just taking this woman because
Right.
he's
Well,
the
presumably he's
Pharaoh.
the Pharaoh. Pharaoh can do whatever he wants to. But no, I'm not forgiving it. I'm just saying that probably was what was going on back then. I don't think Sarai. My guess is that they didn't really care what she had to say, and it was,
No, she didn't matter at all.
Right.
No, I get it that Abraham, he was put in a terrible position because I'm sure he didn't want that to happen to her.
Correct.
So.
I think, yes, I don't think he wanted it to happen to her, and I think that's the trial. But I agree with what we're all saying is that, but still, that doesn't, but ultimately, the way I look at it is, yes, that was really hard on him, and it was a trial for him, but I don't forgive him for it.
right.
Right? I find that to be a real problem. And by the way, and Sarah's never going to forgive him for it either. By the way, remember us studying in the Torah study over the years about how she never forgot this.
I'm sure you told us the story too, but in the beginning they're called Abram and
Right? They get their
Sarai.
names changed to Abraham and Sarah.
When is that? Is that much later or?
I think we actually read about it.
Okay,
But
well,
also,
we'll-
it's terribly sad that this has to happen to Sarai, and then she's barren after all that. She doesn't even get.
I know. And that's part of the reason why she's so mad at him. So then Genesis 14 comes around. So we're now on trial number 4. Now when King Amraphel of Shinar, King Arioch of Elasar, King Shedorlaomer of Elam, and King Tidal of Goyim made war on King Bera of Sodom, King Bersha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. Did you get all that? Okay. And the latter joined forces at the valley of Siddim, now the Dead Sea. 12 years they served Shedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Shedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated Rephaim at Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zuzim at Ham, and the Mim at Shav. Why did I put all this in here? On the way back, I'm on 7, they came to Ein Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and subdued all the territory of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in Chazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela engaged in battle. Why did I put all this in here? Because Maimonides made me. Okay, here we go. Verse 12. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, and his possessions and departed, for he had settled in Sodom. A fugitive brought the news to Avram the Hebrew, who was dwelling at the terebinths of Mamre, the Amorite, kinsman of Eshcol, and Aner, these being Avram's allies. When Avram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he mustered his retainers, born into his household, numbering 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And Dan is, by the way, in the far north of Israel. If you look at that map, by the way, it's kind of where the Golan Heights of that. I have red, kind of like a semicircle on the top right-hand corner of the map, and that's where Dan is. At night, he and his servants deployed against them and defeated them, and he pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. And Damascus is not that much further than where the Golan Heights is. He brought back all the possessions. He also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions and the women and the rest of the people when he returned from defeating Shedorlamer. I think we can, I don't know why I did so much left. Wait, I just want to make sure. Yeah, it's fine. So the next trial, so we now have done 1, 2, this is the fourth trial, and the fourth trial, according to Maimonides, was that he had to go and rescue his nephew from all of these kings that were in the middle of battle, and he had to insert himself into a war, which obviously was a threat to him, but he succeeded. But that would have been a trial and a test of him, and I think that that's fair to call that a trial for sure. And then it goes on to say, chapter 16. So we're now moving. We started in chapter 12. We're now 4 chapters later. Sarai, Avram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Avram, "Look, God has kept me from bearing. Consort with my maid. Perhaps I shall have a child through her." Right? Sleep with my servant. And if she gets pregnant, I can consider that baby mine. And Avram heeded Sarai's request. So Sarai, Avram's wife, took her maid Hagar the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt in the land of Canaan 10 years, and gave her to her husband Avram as concubine. He cohabited with Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. So so the next trial, according to Maimonides, was that he was forced by his wife to sleep with another woman and get, for the purposes of having a child, which he did, but the fact that his own wife was barren was a trial for him and a difficulty for him. Fair enough. I mean, some of these trials are worse than others, but fair enough. And then, just a few verses later, this is actually one which people might have looked over, but I agree with Maimonides. Avram said to Sarai, "Your maid is in your hands." In other words, deal with her as you think right. In other words, she's not because it said earlier in verse 4, he cohabited with Hagar, she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. So in other words, Sarah regretted the decision.
Oh, okay.
Or was angry about the fact that, or jealous, regret, jealousy.
But who was lowered in whose esteem?
Hagar was lowered in Sarah's esteem. Oh wait,
I thought it was the other way around.
No, it is. Excuse me, it is the other way around.
Right.
And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. So in other words, Hagar was now trying to raise herself up as, right. I guess we're equal now. That equal.
I had a kid.
Because I have a kid, you don't.
More. I had a baby.
That's
right. I've got a baby, you don't. And so now it's becoming a problem between Sarah and Hagar. And so what does Abraham do? Because now he's dealing with his two essentially wives fighting.
Rare.
He says, "Your maid is in your hands, deal with her as you think right." So Sarai treated her harshly, and she, meaning Hagar, ran away from her. An angel of God found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the road to shore, and said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. And the angel of God said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment. I think that the trial that Abraham was that he had to be a part of this kind of fighting that was going on between these two women, or it could have been that she was sent off, as it seems like she ran away, and that that the mother of his child ran off, and it was or soon to be mother of his child. So
I think it's that he had to deal with these fighting women.
Probably so.
I wouldn't want to be in that position.
I wouldn't either. I would not either. Okay, so then Genesis 17. By the way, so a lot of chapters have come. Now we're 5 chapters into the story, and we have the story of the birth of Ishmael, and it says, "You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you." Gotta say, yeah, that's a pretty decent trial right there, that you circumcise yourself when you're, I think, 80 years old or 90 years old. And so, yeah, I grant that.
Question, how old was he when
I think 80 or 90, I can't remember which one. I mean, boy, yeah. So now, I think this is the next one. I think this is the one we were talking, that Mark, you were referencing. So now we're in chapter 20. So again, started in 12 or 8 chapters into it. Abraham, now his name has been changed, journeyed from there to the region of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. While he was sojourning in Gerar, Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. So he's now not in Egypt, but he is in this area in the south in the desert called Gerar. And I think it was actually controlled by Egypt. But Abram said of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. So King Avimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him.
Go again.
The exact same story, right? But God came to Avimelech in a dream by night and said to him, you are to die because of the woman that you have taken, for she is a married woman. Right? It's basically the same story, just kind of told a little differently. Now, Avimelech had not approached her. He said, meaning he had not yet slept with her, as the Pharaoh had. He said, O my sovereign, will you slay people even though innocent? He himself said to me, he himself said to me, she is my sister. And she also said, he is my brother. When I did this, my heart was blameless and my hands were clean. In other words, Avimelech is saying, don't blame me. I was lied to here. And I'm hearing you now and following you're like, before I made this mistake. Like, so again, Avimelech is a good guy in all this. And God said to him in the dream, I knew that you did this with a blameless heart, and so I kept you from sinning against me, meaning I came to you in a dream before it was too late. That's why I did not let you touch her. Therefore, restore the man's wife, since he is a prophet, he will intercede for you to save your life. If you fail to restore her, know that you shall die, you and all that are yours. By the way, I have a theory, which a little off the subject theory, but my theory is that people claim that Abraham is like the essence and like everything is about Abraham, the father of our people. But in truth, I think it was Sarah. Yeah. And the reason why is because like God here, we think Abraham needs a child. And so Abraham gets a child, Ishmael, but it's not good enough, right? And it's like we need Sarah to give birth to a child. Sarah is the key piece to this, not Abraham. And so, and God is even saying, I need Sarah to get back to Abraham. That she is the key ingredient in all this. I really believe that it's only because it was a patriarchal society that, of course, wanted to suggest that it's all about Abraham. But I think that had our first sages our first, commentators been women and not men, I think we would all be seeing these stories different, and I think we would be talking about Sarah as the prime person. My opinion, my theory. So Abimelech summoned Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? What wrong have I done that you should bring such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done to me things that ought not be done." What then, Abimelech demanded of Abraham, was your purpose in doing this? I thought, this verse 11, I thought, said Abraham, surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. And besides, she is in truth my sister, my father's daughter, though not my mother's. That's where you remember reading this.
Yeah.
Which is such bull. Like, how do I'm afraid because we're being recorded, I'm not going to say.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, I didn't actually do it because I wasn't actually lying because, well, in truth, she is my half sister, right?
But also, like, if he would have ended up dead because they wanted to take her, the king isn't perfectly blameless here because that's not right.
Right. Well, it's true, but that was just the way things went. But you're right. But my point being,
So in the day, marrying your sister, your half sister, was
it must have been
acceptable.
Yeah, but we don't know. It doesn't say. He says it here, and so I believe it. But it doesn't say it.
Half sister.
Right, but it doesn't say it. It doesn't say it doesn't say in the beginning that Terach took his daughter.
Right.
It says Terach took Abraham and Abraham's wife. And so in one part, it suggests, it doesn't suggest that they're brother and sister, but in the other part it does. And I bet you if I looked earlier and we look at the genealogy, we might find that in fact it's true. But I think that it is it's an attempt to try to justify Abraham's position when it's really unjustified. Because the reason why he did it was because they were married. And so now saying, oh, but I said she was my sister, that wasn't a lie because it's actually true. But you wouldn't have done this otherwise. You were lying about, you intentionally withheld the truth about being a spouse because you were trying to save your life. So Abraham's excuse is lame at best. But we can, okay. So we can stop after this, we don't. So trial number, what I think we're on 7, was that he had to go through that yet again of having to put, of near death, having to put, his wife in that situation to avoid, famine. Now, chapter 21 is Ishmael is older. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham playing. Now, playing, whatever, it doesn't, because point is, Sarah said to Abraham, cast out the slave woman and her son. Kick out Hagar and Ishmael. For the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, because it concerned a son of his. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. But by the way, again, back to my theory about Sarah. It's so interesting that God continues to say to Abraham, do what she says. Make her happy. It's like, because it's really about her.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, that's true. You can say that, and I agree with that. That's how a modern person should read this. But at the same time, it's also suggesting that perhaps this is, God, that this really is God protecting the golden child in all this, which is Sarah, not Abraham. Willing to have Abraham go through pain to make sure that she is happy. Early the next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. It's fine, we'll just skip through. But so next trial, because we're just getting late. The next trial is that Abraham was forced to send away Hagar to death, essentially. She didn't die, but she could have. So send her away. And his son,
Right. The son who he's been waiting for
Yeah,
90
that he's been
years.
waiting for, well, yes, except now she has enough, now Isaac is alive.
Yeah, but he's
Is he?
still.
Oh, I-
Agreed, but
Yeah.
now Isaac is alive. I'm just pointing out, so it's not the only son at this point, but yes, the son that he had been waiting for, and that he had to sleep with the concubine in order to get that one son. And now you're telling me to, like, I love this kid as I love the woman, and I don't want them to die, and you're making me do this, and I'm doing it to make you happy, Sarah. It is a trial. That's a legit trial, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
absolutely.
That's a legit trial.
This
Chapter,
is one-
yeah,
it's
go
one
ahead.
of the few that God either makes or sits by and watches that they go through with.
Yeah.
This isn't bring Isaac to
Yeah,
the sacrifice, but no, never mind.
right.
This is, yep, move them out.
But also, yeah, back then you would assume that they'd be dead.
But you know, it was
You wouldn't
interesting.
But they were
They
saved.
were
They were
saved,
saved, but
You wouldn't think
And
that
he
when.
says in here to Abraham, I think it is, God says to Abraham, and I will make a nation out of him.
yes, it says it here. It says, okay, so let's finish reading it. Verse 15, when the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes. In other words, she basically couldn't watch him die. She put him under the bushes. They're out of water. They're in the middle of the desert. She can't bear to see him die. And so she has to move away, and went and sat down at a distance, a bow shot away, for she thought, let me not look on as the child dies. I mean, this is a heartbreaking story.
Yeah.
And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. God heard the cry of the boy, and an angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? It's like, duh.
Yeah.
For God has heeded the cry of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him by the hand. For I will make a great nation of him too. In other words, I got good news for you. He's not dying. I'm going to make a great nation of him. So that's exactly what you said. And then the last trial, which is the one that everybody knows. So I don't think especially because we're now a little bit past 8, I'm not going to go into read all this, but we know this one. It's the famous one. It's, God puts Abraham to test and makes him sacrifice Isaac. But now that's, of all of the ones, the biggest one, because that's the one in which, he has to send off Ishmael, and he thinks that now he's down to one kid. And now God's taken that other kid away from him, and that is quite a trial for him. There's no doubt.
God doesn't tell Sarai to do that. He tells Abraham.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Abraham's center stage here.
Right. Abraham is center stage. There's no doubt. But it could just be, God toying around with this guy when all along it was Sarah, which was the important one.
I don't remember. I grew up in a conservative synagogue, and I really don't remember back in the day. But I think in Reform, or at least at Temple Beth Shalom, where we give, the patriarchs and the matriarchs
Equal.
They're both highlighted. I don't know if they're equal.
Right. Well, the only reason why they're not, let's call it equal, is merely because we don't have nearly the material about the matriarchs that we have about the patriarchs.
Yeah.
And so there's, right, if you have, for every 10 stories, 9 of them are about the patriarchs and 1 are about the matriarchs.
Yeah.
So by definition, you do your best to give, let's say, not 10%, but 20% to the matriarchs, but it's still 20 to 80 as opposed to 10 to 90, which is what the actual amount is. And I think that, but I do think that we in the Reform movement have tried very hard to kind of elevate the matriarchs, but it's hard.
When you talk about the liturgy to the congregation, I think, I don't know, my kind of memory of feeling is, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, they're all there.
I agree. I'll never say patriarchs without including matriarchs. Like, I feel like, and the same goes, by the way, because let's say all these stories are happening to the men. If I know with my modern lens, and I think we all do, I'd like to think we all do, and if we don't, then shame on anyone who doesn't. But for any time a person who is married and you work things out amongst a couple that this is how we're going to do things, you know that means that the wife is just as critical to to everything that's going on as the husband, or vice versa if it's the wife that's doing. Like and so
teamwork,
therefore,
whatever it is.
right.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it's just that, it's the
One of the challenges that I think our generation has, and maybe every generation has, is we tend to look at history and try to hold them accountable for our mores and morals and
Right.
ethics and everything. I mean, life was clearly different. It was clearly a patriarchal society back then, and the inheritance went through the
father. Yep.
and the father was the boss, the leader of the tribe, and it was warlike and all that kind of stuff. So, and we, there's other things that I think we feel worse about the past than that, but that's something that I think this generation has come to grips with. The baby boomers were the first ones, and, women fought their way into that position.
Right, they fought their way into that position. I agree, and they've continued to fight this battle. And the thing about it is, and it's an uphill battle, because to this day people don't give credit to Eisenhower's wife, or they're like, oh, look how great Eisenhower was. And I'm not saying whatever he did, good, bad, whatever. But the point is that he was able to do what he was able to do because he had a support system sitting behind him. And so therefore, it's like, how it's not right to just kind of ignore the support system behind somebody when, minus that support system, they can't do what they did. Period. They just cannot do what they've done. And so it's like, that's why I think it's so essential to just to insert the matriarchs in every step of the way. They don't have the stories about them, but that's because the men who wrote this didn't want to grant them the stories. But I think there's enough clues here to suggest that Sarah played a much more significant role in this story than we give credit for. And we just but since most of the stories are about Abraham, but in some cases it's about toying with Abraham. But it's like that we're not, that it's that. So for reform, I think this is where reform is very much right on target. It's when we give credit, just because the stories necessarily aren't there, we recognize that it's just because they weren't written. But the fact is that they're there, they just weren't written.
Well,
because we know they have to be there.
Well, if you look at the story, Sarah goes with the Pharaoh willingly and does what she has to do,
Right.
probably because she wants to save Abraham.
Right.
She could have said, no, I'm not doing that.
Right. It's exactly correct. Or no, I'm going to say you're his wife.
I can do whatever I want.
Exactly right.
No,
the fact that you would make me do such a thing makes me now want to actually stick it to you. Right? The fact that you would put me in this situation is remarkable. Now here comes it back to you.
If she's beautiful, I guess she looks like she's fine anywhere. So why would she?
I agree. She should be credited with this stuff. She is the savior of our people on a number of occasions, and yet, right? It's all about Abraham. And I think that, and so my little theory is that it's really about her all along. And the fact though that we have a story having to do with, it's like, if you think it's Abraham needs a child, it's not, because Abraham got a child, but it wasn't enough, right? The child needed to be with Sarah. Done, right? It's in order for then our line to continue. So what that means is it's about Sarah.
But on the other hand, whether it's about Abraham or Sarah, if they needed to have a child, why did God wait till their 90s?
Right.
Or in their 90s?
Or why did he have to, you wonder why did he have to be with Hagar in the first place?
I agree with you. Exactly. I agree. I don't know. I don't understand why that was, if this is so critical. But then again, but then similarly, I think the answer is the same as why would God threaten to kill Isaac when Isaac was promised to be the one who, the future, because it's it's always been a test. Again, and maybe that's the reason why they had to put these 10 trials, these 10 tests here, because things don't make any sense. Why would God do these things? And so they say, oh, it's because it was tests.
No, it's because of 10 generations that never passed the test. Now I got to see, before we start with you,
we're doing a test for every generation.
But also, if you look at it, life was really rough back then, and you want people to keep going, and you want to give them something to keep going for. So.
Yeah, but again, I think that it seems to me that that we created this idea of 10 trials of Abraham because we wanted all of the things which didn't seem to make sense for us just having this, this ark, which
Yeah.
we would be a great nation
Yeah.
that didn't, God's promising it, but yet this is happening and that's happening and this is happening and that's happening. And so therefore, we'll just call them intentional trials of Abraham to see if he was
There's
worthy.
a sense that we have to earn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
exactly
there's
right.
Trials of Heracles. Why, in different cultures,
Right.
Yeah.
they all have
Odysseus.
trials. So Odysseus.
Yeah.
Oh, right, the Hebrew who has to go out and prove himself.
And by the way, just to be clear about something, okay, so Greek mythology came after the biblical text,
Yeah.
but not long after. And so
That's my
Homer
next
was
question. Who
writing.
came first?
What's that?
That was my next question going to be, who came first?
So Homer was writing what, like 400 or something like that? I don't know. I think it was right after, but we're talking about roughly that these early Greek writings and myths were happening roughly at the same time, and so therefore they were working off of the same kind of material.
That's what I was wondering, how similar, how related some of these
Working off the
labors.
same material. Don't get me started on the Epic of Gilgamesh being the
Yeah.
same exact
Yeah,
story as
exactly.
Noah. I mean, it's like so all of these stories are they aren't what I'll tell you what they aren't. What they aren't is one copying off of the other. I think what they are is both kind of taking some sort of narrative that everyone knows and incorporating it into its own stories. And I think the Homer stuff and the trials that Homer put out there and the trials here, I don't think it's one stole from the other. I think it's both texts were working off of this notion of the hero having to
persevere.
earn it. And so, are you looking up when Homer wrote?
Yeah.
When was it?
It says guesses at Homer's birth date range from 750 BC all the way back to 1200 BC.
No way, it's 1200. So
But I thought the stories, okay.
No, Homer was
It's
350 to 400 BC.
And Bob says 350 or 400. That's what I thought. But even if it's 700, then that is around the same time that the Torah is being
Well, I thought
written.
that's when the stories were, like he was writing about several 100-year-old stories.
Maybe.
from
So
earlier.
what I'm saying is I think that they're both kind of, and again, I don't think it's one copying from the other. I think rather what it is both copying from
Like,
life or from
mythology of the day.
oral tales that were kind of shared.
right.
Right, the communal storytelling.
Yes.
In all those
Yes,
cultures.
exactly correct.
And what do you tell stories about? Women, relationships with women.
Trials and tests
Heroes,
and
super
heroic
war,
stuff
yeah.
and wars, right, of
war
course.
and,
Yeah, floods and destroying the earth and stuff like that. No. So whereas a lot of people claim, oh, we Epic of Gilgamesh is older than the Torah, so therefore we must have stole it. No, slow down. I don't think anyone stole anything except we both took from a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire telling a story and remembering that story and then going off their own directions and writing about it.
Actually, I misspoke. Homer was between the 7th and 8th century BC,
Yeah.
but his stories were not transcribed.
Until later.
Yeah, because mostly they were oral,
Right.
and it wasn't just one person. It was
Right. So, I mean,
Oh,
we're talking
people-
about Homer's stories being
Yeah.
contemporaneous with the stories of the Torah and the writing of the Torah.
Well,
they're all male centric.
and every
Yep.
generation wrote about the themes of that generation. They
Yep.
have different stories, but the same themes.
Yep.
That's history. It's all the same stuff. It's just
Yeah.
coming back in a different package, but it's.
Yeah.
All right, boys and girls, I'm going to go
Okay.
home and take a shower and see my house again. But bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, Rabbi.
Hey,
Thank you.
Bob, Heel, do not leave the house. Enjoy Friday
No.
when you
No.
go and have your next physical therapy.
Is that sheet posted on the classroom?
It was.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
From last week.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sure. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.